Okay, so yeah, I think we'll go ahead and start. Welcome everybody to Reimagining Caregiving Dynamics. My name is Hannah Sawyer. My pronouns are she, her, and a quick visual description of myself in case there's anyone watching who needs visual description. I'm a white woman with a white t-shirt on. I have a blonde ponytail. I'm wearing rainbow earrings, and there's sort of a white and gold mandala tapestry hanging in my background. I'm the content specialist for the National Paralysis Resource Center through the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. I'm also a writer. I've relied on caregivers my whole life as a woman with a disability. I had my first hired helper when I was 3 years old, and since then have had over 80 different helpers. And I'm really approaching this conversation from the perspective that everybody needs other people in their life, and everybody will need different levels of care throughout their lives, whether they identify as having a disability or not. And I really lean heavily on the concept of interdependence and thinking about how we're all connected. I'm going to introduce Annie Heathcote, our guest speaker for today. Annie Heathcote serves as Miss Wheelchair Wisconsin 2023, a role in which she works to advance accessibility and inclusion while also educating various organizations about disability-related topics. In particular, Annie advocates for topics related to her platform, Caring is Caregiving. With this platform, she hopes to educate the public on caregiving needs and the benefits of becoming a caregiver, so our country can collectively make a difference in this critical area. Annie is also a freelance web and graphic designer under her own business, Annie Designs LLC. She enjoys spending time with family and friends, traveling, making art, singing at church, and competing as an elite athlete in power soccer. Annie, welcome. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So before we delve into the questions, I just want to emphasize that Annie and I today are speaking from our lived experiences. We're not policy experts beyond the expertise that we have gained from navigating this system our entire lives. And then we also just want to emphasize that everyone who needs care deserves care and deserves healthy caregiving relationships, and that having our care needs met should not depend on our likability. Okay. So Annie, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your relationship to caregiving?
Yeah, so a little bit about myself. Well, you had a great bio, so thank you for reading that. But yeah, I have SMA, spinal muscular atrophy, and it makes my muscles tighten up and really weak. So because of that, I go through life living with a lot more challenges, but I've always loved to overcome those and give everything my best shot. And I've been able to accomplish the same things as non-disabled people, and then also been able to do some really cool things like be Miss Wheelchair Wisconsin and compete for Miss Wheelchair America. And how caregiving plays into my life is, in order for me to do these really cool things and have all these neat opportunities, I have to have someone get me up out of bed every day and do my different care shifts in order to do the daily routines that we all take for granted. So I really heavily rely on caregivers, and it's such a passionate topic of mine because I live it, and it was also my platform topic, Caring is Caregiving.
Thanks, Annie. Can you tell us all a little bit more about Miss Wheelchair Wisconsin and the importance of that organization for disability advocacy?
Yeah, so it's a competition based on achievement, communication, and presentation, and they select the most accomplished spokeswoman who has a disability, who's in a wheelchair, to advocate for the more than 64 million people and Americans living with disabilities. So It's a volunteer opportunity, and we get to impact lives and represent individuals with disabilities, especially women. And we advance accessibility and inclusion. I traveled all over the state, speaking to schools, colleges, businesses, organizations, and it really helps spread the word not only on different disability topics, but especially my platform, Caring is Caregiving, which this all in turn makes your home state of Wisconsin a more welcoming and inclusive place.
Thank you. So we're actually going to quickly watch your speech that you gave, which it won best speech of the competition.
Yeah,
It's phenomenal. I'm gonna quickly
Thank you.
share the screen.
Awesome.
Okay.
She passed it back in store. The day was won, not because of one, but because of teamwork. Teamwork is what makes life function, and teamwork is what makes my life function. Now, there's a type of teamwork that not many people know about. This is caregiving. According to long-term care workforce crisis 2022 report, there is an increase in the number of caregiver vacancies at an alarming rate of 27.8%. With wage competition and our culture becoming more individualistic, it leaves the largest minority group, people with disabilities, in a vulnerable state. This needs to change. Caregiving is as simple as knowing someone's limits and helping to meet their needs. These routines are common to everyone's daily work, so why not help someone and get paid? It's time to step on our busy lives into compassion and strive towards someone in good care. Caregiving is a rewarding team relationship. My caregivers provide me with physical care, but I provide my caregivers with emotional care. On days when they need a shoulder to cry on, a listening ear, or help with their boy drama, I am there to instill comment, wisdom, and porcelain throne. If I were Miss Chancellor, I would continue to advocate for the needs of caregivers and the benefits of becoming one, so we can collectively make a difference in this hashtag disabled life. We all need care, so become part of the caregiving team today.
Wonderful. Okay. So yeah, so thank you again for all of that. And before we get into talking, really delving deep into this concept of reimagining caregiving relationships, caregiving dynamics, I do want to briefly talk about the logistics of finding and hiring caregivers, because as we both know, I think very dearly, perhaps all too well, and what has been demonstrated through the questions that were sent ahead of time for this webinar, this is something that people really really are needing more direction on and needing more support on. I think we all need more support on this. So I'm going to briefly share some basic facts about my own experience, and then Annie, I'm going to pass it off to you. So for myself, and I think for a wide range of people with disabilities, care attendant hours are covered through Medicaid or Medicaid waivers, and specifically the home and community-based services. Doesn't usually cover all that we need, but it is a start. And in order to find those caregivers, you can go through an agency, or you can hire your own people through programs such as consumer choice options. That's a program specific to my state of Iowa, so it might be different in various states. And honestly, like Annie and I talked about this before, this could be an entire webinar on its own because of all of the various things to navigate. So yeah, Annie, what have you found?
Yeah, so this is a really big topic, but it's so important. So a few things I want to highlight first are different ways to find caregivers. So always be looking, I say, if you're out and about or all the connections that you have, you never know who could be a potential caregiver. And so you always have to kind of have that mindset. Also job postings on social media and Facebook and college job boards or job sites like Indeed, care.com, or even your local newspaper. Those are all great options, just how people would, normally post a job, like caregiving is a job. So it's also fun, but yes, it's a job. So use those outlets. And then just word of mouth and life contacts, like let people know that you need care to live your life, and they might be more inclined to try out the job and see if it's for them. I've also found people, just out and about through different organizations that I'm involved with, or family, friends, different clubs like in college, church, and then just outings in general, like sometimes just random strangers, but you just I'm pretty outgoing, so I tend to just talk to people, and I just enjoy that, and you just never know where that could go. So if you don't need skilled nursing care like me, I'm just willing to hire anyone that's willing to listen, learn, and respect who I am as a person in my routine. Yeah, and I would also encourage you to really think about your audience. I know obviously, like, if you're disabled, you're the one that needs care. But when you think about your audience and how to phrase it to them, they really want to know what's in it for them and the incentives. So a few of those that I list in my job ads, if you want to write this down, no experience required. That's for me. Some people need skilled nursing. Great side hustle. Everyone likes that side hustle option, it's really flexible, so you can work around school, job, or family. It's a fun, casual work environment. Me and my caregivers usually talk a lot while we do the routine. It just makes it more enjoyable and fun for both of us, where it doesn't really feel like a job, It also helps someone be independent, and it's a state-of-the-art friendly home environment. If you're not in a hospital where you don't really know how healthy people are, or if you're going to get sick, or a nursing home where you could spread sickness. It's a really safe, sanitary home environment, and I think that's really an incentive that not many people think about either. And then I always say I give top-notch training, of course. I really enjoy training and let people know like my care needs and my routines and all the little preferences that we have, because if you think about it, we all have preferences. Like, how do you brush your teeth? Is it side to side or is it circles? So those things that maybe able-bodied people do without even thinking about it, those are the kind of things that as a disabled person I have to articulate in order to get my needs met. And then it's just a great way, caregiving is a great way to gain experience, and it looks really great on a resume. And I know we can't really control the pay, like if you work through an agency, but one thing you can do is kind of phrase it as, if you work one shift, depending on how many hours it is, you can get like $36, so kind of lump sum it together so it seems like a higher amount. And that's kind of the things that you can do to help hire caregivers.
Yeah, those are great. Thank you, Annie.
Mhm.
So from your perspective, why are we currently in a caregiving crisis? Because that's, a phrase that gets thrown around a lot. And I mean, we are, but why do you think that is? And how do we counteract that?
Yeah, so I think there's a few different things that cause this caregiving crisis, right? It's not just one thing, or else it'd be easy to solve, right? So there's wage competition, of course. Like, it's unfortunate, but you can work in a fast food place sometimes more than what you get paid for caregiving, which is almost like CNA care. Like, it's a big deal and people rely on you. And then our culture sometimes is becoming more individualistic. I think, like, we aren't really thinking as for others as much, or volunteering as much. We see things on social media, but I'm not sure how our mindset is nowadays. And then also a rapidly aging population and shortage of workforce. Baby boomers are getting older, and they're the ones that are needing care now. So there isn't that large workforce taking care of the other generations. So, and then a lack of funding, of course, we all would like more funding from the agencies and government, Medicaid, things like that. Unfortunately, there's no really health benefits or paid time off. And people have that in other jobs. And, that's really important, especially when you're doing physical work, to have that backup or insurance kind of like if something happens. And then unfortunately, I just feel like there's a lack of job respect and how people view caregiving. It's kind of seen as that like lowly job, like people don't want to either talk about it or think about it or acknowledge that people with disabilities need care. And because of that, if you're a caregiver, it's not always seen as like, you reached your dream job kind of thing. And it really is one of the most impactful jobs and most important jobs that you can have, because you're literally allowing someone to get out of bed every day to live their life. And something I have people picture is just like you lying in bed in the morning, just laying completely still, acting like you can't move and being like, okay, how am I going to get up today if there's no one to help me? And the answer is you don't get up if there's no one to help you. So we depend so heavily on that. And that's why it's important for caregivers to show up to shifts too, because we rely on you. And then there's not really career advancement. People in the workplace like a challenge. They like to grow. They like to learn and make a difference. And if they feel they aren't getting that, sometimes they can sway away from the opportunity of caregiving. And then just a basic lack of awareness and education around the topic. People think, okay, if I'm a CNA, I can only work in a hospital or a nursing home. But there's this whole home care market that people aren't considering. So, with all these things, it really leaves people with disabilities, unfortunately, in a vulnerable state.
Yeah. Thank you. That was a really comprehensive overview. Yeah, and I know, you and I had talked about like, how are we going to counteract that? And really, I think it comes down to, besides the larger systemic issues, right, of like getting more funding, getting more policies in place that are protecting us, we ultimately need to make caregiving an appealing job, like you said. And we ultimately have to re-envision what these relationships and dynamics can look like to ensure sustainability. That's why we're here, right? So, so in your speech for the Miss Wheelchair America competition, you emphasized teamwork as a basic part of everyone's life. How does teamwork play out in your life? And specifically, how does that show up in your approach to care?
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate you noticing that, because teamwork is huge in multiple aspects of life. Some of those for me are like managing my own business. Like I'm a graphic designer. I have to market myself and then advertise my services and then coordinate with the client and then do the work and then, fulfill the project and how, their expectations and all that. And that's a teamwork thing. Like, what do you need, client? And then how can I help you fulfill that? And how can we like reach this goal together? Also family dynamics, like you just, you love your family, but you don't always get along sometimes maybe. And, but you really have to work and like communicate well and what your needs are and what your expectations are and how you go about living life. Like who's cooking dinner, who's cleaning the house, what are your responsibilities? And I've found just a lot of, in general, open communication about these subjects just really help. And like even knowing people's schedule, like I share a calendar with some people so they know my commitments and I know theirs so that we can collaborate on things better. And then of course, managing caregivers and all the things that come with that. So, finding caregivers, hiring them, training them, making sure they have a great work environment. So teamwork really plays a role in all that, because whenever you're working with another person, you're a part of a team. And I think that's just a neat way to look at it.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll also say, from my perspective, when I interview potential caregivers, I always emphasize to them that they're working on a team with
Mm.
other caregivers.
Yeah.
And I really work to foster that. Like, I want them to think of it as a team so that they can help each other out when they need shifts covered. Yeah, but I mean, ultimately, right, it comes down to everything that we've been saying, that everybody is relying on everybody else. Like, we all need people, whether we have a disability or not. Like, we all need help. And I think that acknowledging that and then working together to meet those needs is really powerful.
Yeah.
So another line from your speech that struck me is, caregiving is as simple as knowing someone's limits and helping to meet their needs. Let's talk about balance and boundaries.
Let's
This
talk
is like
about it.
the hugest thing, right? So yeah, you also, have this really good point in your speech where you say your caregivers are providing you with physical care, but you're providing them with emotional care. And I think that's true. Like, I think that oftentimes for me, I feel like I get into a place where I am performing like emotional labor for my caregivers that is, I mean, I it's a continual learning and practice of setting boundaries. So what happens when you can't provide emotional care? Like, how do you navigate that? Because, ultimately, us getting good care should not rely on that, right?
Right. Like, we're all human, we all have good and bad days, and it's important to understand that so that you can have like empathy both ways in that team working relationship like we're talking about. So like one thing I say, if let's say I have like a really long day the day before, I work from sun up to sundown between all my cares, my work schedule, and then my volunteer schedule. Like, it's a long day and maybe even multiple days in a row. So just my caregivers usually get up an hour before I do by the time they get here and get set up and everything. So they're wide awake by the time they wake me up, and I'm just waking up, and I do not want to be up at that hour. So when they say is like, hey, I've had a really tough day. I really can't talk right now, but maybe in a little bit, or I really care about you. Can we talk about this later or at a later shift or later in the shift? So really just communicating that and not being like, I don't want to talk right now. I didn't sleep well. Like, just have like you really have to watch how you talk, because a lot of what people don't think about is, people get ready, they have their me time, their coffee, devotional, whatever they do in the morning. And then you go to work and then you're presentable, right? You have this like work face on or whatever. But my caregivers see me when I'm like at like 6 a.m., I'm not always all put together like this, right? And so I have to really remember to be on my game when I wake up, but I'm not a perfect human by any means. So just being real and realistic with one another.
Yeah, and I'll say too, like, just to I don't know, just to like, provide maybe another perspective or push back a tiny bit on what you're saying, Annie, is I also think that like, those of us who have caregivers early in the morning, we still deserve that time of like not being great conversationalists, I guess. And so
Yeah.
I think that, and this is something that I've learned and I'm continuing to learn and I'm continuing to work on, is like being able to tell people even from the get-go, like there's going to be days where I am tired or in a bad mood or sad or not wanting to talk, and explaining to them, because this is something also that I've had to accept and work on myself and realize, is that it's my life. Like I have people with me 24/7. And so I don't get a break from that. Whereas when someone comes in to work a shift, they're with me, say, for 6 hours and then they leave. And so it's sort of, a different dynamic. But yeah, I mean, I think that exactly what you said about like open communication that emphasizes our needs, that's so important. And I think also, like, from my perspective, I think that what makes caregiving relationships healthy and sustainable is what makes any sort of relationship healthy and sustainable, whether that's, a friendship, a romantic relationship, a familiar relationship. And I think that includes like being able to know and communicate your needs, as we've said. But I also think that that includes feeling safe and empowered to do so. And sometimes, we end up in situations where we don't feel like we can voice our needs or voice what we, are wanting in that moment. And that can be really tricky. And I think being able to know and communicate your boundaries. And then also, I think that being aware of where each person is coming from, this is like such a huge one. And I struggle with this a lot, right? But like in any relationship, whether it's caregiving, friendship, romantic, etc., everybody is coming into that relationship with different backgrounds and different life experiences. And I think that like, yeah, I mean, I think with caregiving relationships, especially, there's, oftentimes these unequal power dynamics of like someone is coming in and we rely on them with our life, and so they have that power over us.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, we're paying them and employing them, so we have that power over them. So it's sort of this weird balance and dance and thinking like, okay, how am I going to navigate that? And I think also, like, for me at least, being able to acknowledge that and be aware of that and then engage in those relationships in a way that, to the best of our ability is respecting one another's autonomy is really important.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree with all you're saying. I see that perspective too, and I have that perspective too. Yeah, just that whole power dynamic of like, okay, you never want to fight with a caregiver either, right? Like you always, it's a professional environment, but yet, you're friends in a lot of cases because you spend so much time together that you talk to them and get to know them. And yeah, you do you really gotta have those emotional boundaries too, because sometimes they can use information to hurt you or vice versa. And yeah, you really gotta be careful and vigilant. You hope everyone has a good heart, but not everyone does. Sometimes they are there just to do the job. And that is hard because that's not when I really feel cared for. Like, and maybe they don't feel cared for me in a certain way. I don't know. But yeah, it's definitely interesting because we're working with humans. Like we are complicated beings and we have a lot of needs and unmet needs. And when you're in a working relationship that relies on a lot of personal cares, that can be a really vulnerable place.
Yeah. I think yeah, that leads me to my next question, but I'll transition by saying, that thought of like we're all human, and recognizing that like us as employers are human and we're perhaps in this specific scenario, we can't really separate our role as an employer from our role as a human because those people are coming directly into our lives to help them. But then also like acknowledging that our caregivers are humans. Like it's not care being performed by robots. Everybody's different. Everybody does things a little bit differently, and that's something that I have learned to embrace as I've gotten older and had more caregivers of like, everybody works a little bit differently. Everybody has their own ways of doing things. And it can take, a little bit of time to adjust to that. But once you're able to approach things from that way, I do think that it makes things easier because then you can see it as like, okay, this is how someone does something versus this person instead of like, oh my gosh, why is this person doing it this way? So, yeah, I mean, like I've said, I've had hired caregivers pretty much my entire life. I'm constantly learning new ways to navigate that relationship, just like I just said to you, and to make it as healthy and sustainable as possible. What is one thing or a few things you've learned that has caused you to approach caregiving differently?
Yeah, so I would say just approach it with gratitude, like as much as I might not be a morning person, when I see my caregiver come, like, sacrifice their time to take care of me, and like I just like view it from a perspective of gratitude and appreciate them being there, and like I'm thankful for their time and their care. And like we were saying before, we have good days and bad days, so providing as much empathy to them as possible, like as much as you would like back, like you should give to them. To like that teamwork relationship, right? You gotta like, pass the ball off to them, and they'll pass it back. It's that trust relationship. Um, and there are also people who need care. It's a different kind of care, like the emotional care, that we can provide for them. So
Yeah, thank you. I think that idea of like teamwork and working together makes me think of interdependence, which is something that I really try to integrate into my life. Yeah, I think all of that is so good. And oh, sorry, were you going to say something?
no, go ahead. I was
Sorry.
agreeing with you.
Um, so yeah, I think that, that's it. And I think also for me, I learned that communicating my needs to my caregivers from the very beginning, like even just in the interview, I communicate what my needs are, what my expectations are. I very clearly outline, what the protocol is for needing a shift off or getting a shift covered or being sick, and boundaries. I do all of that right from the beginning so that I have something to fall back on.
Yeah.
I also think that like all of this requires being able to continue to be aware of my own needs and then continue to practice communicating those needs, which I think is hard. I think that's something that everybody, you know, um, everybody probably struggles with in some ways in sort of relationship. Okay, so before we delve into questions, Annie, I just want to thank you again for coming on
Yeah,
and
thanks for having me.
and how can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about
Yeah, for sure. So, I have my own graphic design business where my niche is disability. So if you want to support artists with disabilities and you have a disability cause, feel free to reach out. My website is annieheathcotedesigns.com. So just my name, designs.com. I'm also on Instagram where I post a lot of the volunteer work I've done under my title as Miss Wheelchair Wisconsin 2023. And that is just my name, Annie Heathcote. And then my Facebook page is Miss Wheelchair Wisconsin America 2023, and then Annie Heathcote. So pretty easy to find. I hope to connect with you all. Thank you so much for tuning in. It means a lot.
Thanks, Annie. And I know that your website was put in the chat, so people
Awesome.
can go that way. So we did have one question come through the Q&A, and that is, what's the best way to find a good caregiver if you are on Medicaid and have to hire them through the state. Do you have thoughts about that? Otherwise, I can go.
I will let you go first.
Okay, sure. So I'm not entirely sure specifically, Jane or Janie, however you pronounce your name, what specifically through the state means, but I'm going to take a stab on it. So I hire my caregivers myself, and I use a program called Consumer Choice Options, and it's through CDAC, or Consumer Directed Attendant Care. And so when I was younger, we tried doing agencies. When I first moved away to college, we tried agencies, and it just did not work well for me. And I found that I was doing a lot of the work of scheduling and managing caregivers. And then my caregivers were also getting a pay cut because part of that money from Medicaid was going to the agency. With Consumer Choice Options, which I'm hopeful that there are programs like that in different states, the caregiver gets a bigger cut of that money, and you're able to have more control over it. So what I do is, like Annie mentioned earlier, I advertise the job on social media. I ask my friends and family members to advertise the job. I also send it to a lot of local colleges, specifically like health programs, healthcare programs, like physical therapy, OT, all of the above. And then posting it various, coffee shops, libraries, etc. I will say though, like, it's hard, and I think that it's important to acknowledge that it is really hard. And yeah, I think that that's how I've generally gone about doing it. And then I always make sure before I interview them, I make sure that they can meet all of my requirements that I have on my ad, but I verify that. Then I set up an interview. I talk through what the job looks like, what my expectations are for them, what my needs are. And then I ask if they have questions or concerns. Something I've started doing recently too is asking for references, which I didn't used to do, but I've learned that doing so is a good idea because sometimes you learn really valuable things from people. And even if you don't call the references, it's nice to know that there's some sort of accountability. Annie, do you have-
Yeah, that's a good point. I am gonna come at it from the other perspective, in case the question means like, how do you have a good caregiver if you're with an agency that just sends people to your house to care for you and you don't have the choice to decide. So I would really just emphasize, just have a really open mind, be appreciative of that person coming to help you, have a really clear idea of the care that you need and your routines. Some things I've done is ask people, are you a visual learner or do you like to read to learn? And I'll accommodate their learning styles. So I have a write-up of my whole routine in detail from start to finish so that they can kind of follow along in that process, get trained easier. And then just, being really nice and getting to know them will help foster hopefully a better teamwork, caregiving relationship and make it successful.
Yeah, and I think with that as well, like, again, this would depend on the specific scenario, but hopefully, if you were to find yourself in a situation with someone being sent to your home who is not caring for you in a respectful way or treating you poorly, you would feel empowered. I hope that you would feel empowered to go to that person's supervisor and address that concern with them. because, you know, that's definitely something that unfortunately does happen because of those, well, for so many reasons, but the power dynamics, right? They're off. And so I think that that is, you know, something as well. Another question that was put in the chat, would universities themselves have programs to help with caregiving for students when they live on campus?
Could you say that first part again? Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're fine. Would universities themselves have programs to help with caregiving for students when they live on campus?
I think some classes educate around that topic and some don't, but some students I know just see it on the job board. So that's my experience with that. It seems like you have a little more experience if you want to talk about that, Hannah.
Yeah, so I think if I'm interpreting the question correctly, it's say someone who needs care, someone with a disability who needs care is attending college and living on campus. Does the college have a program in which they would provide care for that student? And I will say from my experience, no. That is something that often colleges do not cover. They have, you know, the student accessibility services or student disability services, and that in my experience has only covered in-class accommodations such as, you know, a special desk or extra time to take tests or, you know, more breaks, etc. That being said, there might be colleges, like I could be wrong about this, but I think the University of Illinois has, has like a
That's what I'm gonna say too. Yeah, I've heard of them having a program where they have students take care of people with disabilities that are also attending there. But you know, I also haven't heard the best things about it. But unfortunately, I've heard that they charge extra tuition for you to cover that care. So they charge it like tuition, which can be thousands of dollars more because it's your state Medicaid program who would normally cover your cares, especially if you're out of state, wouldn't cover that.
Yeah, and I'll also say, like, with that out of state point, so I did my undergrad at the University of Iowa, and so getting care covered through Iowa Medicaid wasn't an issue. And then I went to grad school in Kansas. And we were able to still have it work because I wasn't moving to Kansas permanently. So my residence was still in Iowa, and therefore Medicaid coverage still covered what I needed in Kansas. That is perhaps not applicable for every state, I don't know. But yes.
Did you have to come back every 30 days? I've heard some people have had to do that. Okay.
Are there any other questions? Annie, do you have any last things you would like to say or bring up? It was so wonderful having you on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And you were all a great audience, and I hope you gained a lot of value about what me and Hannah had to say here today. And I just really appreciate your time and attention. So thank you all.
Yes, thank you. And I want to echo everything Annie said. I also just want to reiterate what we brought up at the beginning. We are not policy experts. We're speaking from our own lived experience, which does make us an expert in many ways. But we, you know, we don't have ins and outs of policies. And then also, we really truly do believe that everyone deserves good, healthy care. Whether or not, you know, you're in a good mood that day or not, because we're all human. So I really hope that this has been beneficial for everyone. And one last thing I thought of that I'll just say is that learning to speak up for yourself, like even just with that whole Medicaid thing of like getting hours and transferring to a different state, learning to ask questions. And, you know, if somebody from like a state agency comes to you saying, no, it can't be done this way, just ask them why. Like ask them for proof that it can't be done that way. Because oftentimes when you push back, you start to learn that actually there are different ways of doing things.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you, everyone. There's wonderful resources on the National Paralysis Resource Center site at christopherreeve.org/todayscare. And lots of people have dropped great links in the chat. Thank you, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Annie.